Here's a question to ask yourself if you are wondering if you struggle with having a clear sense of self-identity. When you're around people, do you show up in a way where you're very aware of what other people are needing or wanting from you, and you're willing to step into that to make them happy, right? Do you show up like that around people, very externally focused, or are you unapologetically you? Even if people don't like it, even if they're upset, even if they're disappointed. If your focus is more on making other people happy, then this video is for you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner and the founder of the School of Transformation, which is where I meet live on Zoom every week, and I do the inner work with survivors from all over the world of childhood trauma together. Here on my YouTube channel, we talk about what healing is about, what it looks like, the symptoms of unhealed trauma. But in the School of Transformation, we do the inner healing together. So if you're ready to take the next step, make sure you join me weekly on Zoom. Something I realized myself when I was overcoming my own childhood trauma was the fact that who I was as an adult was really not anywhere near who I was as an authentic person. It was more in harmony with who my protective self was, or who I had to be to survive what I went through. Those are two different things, who I had to be because of the trauma and who I really was as a person. And that was like a big aha moment when I was first on my recovery journey. So what if I told you right now, there's a good chance that who you think you are is not anywhere near who your authentic self is. That the person you spent decades being, the person that puts everyone else first and themselves last on their own list of priorities, the person that is always externally focused, the person that overthinks and gets stuck up in their head all the time, the one that can't seem to relax, that's stuck in hypervigilance. Those characteristics were not shaped by your real personality, but instead they were shaped because of your survival instinct. The hard reality is that if we grew up in an environment that did not foster the ability to become your own authentic self, then our nervous system stepped in and was like, okay, being you is not safe. So we're going to figure it out, and we're going to become what you have to be in order to survive. Authenticity takes a back step. It's in the backseat of your car. It's probably in the trunk of your car, and safety becomes a priority. And so your protective self starts living your life for you, and that changes everything. So let's break that down and really understand why we wind up having no self-identity. Every infant that's born is born as an extension of their parent, right? We start out inside of our mother's womb. We are one in a sense. And then there comes a point, you ever notice a baby's like, they're looking at their hand and they're like, wow, this is me. Basically, the baby's starting to learn the boundaries of its own self. And then as that baby is growing to about 3-ish, they call it the terrible twos, right? 2 to 3. But that's when the baby is realizing it's a separate individual, and it's learning its boundaries. And it's learning what he or she likes, doesn't like, what it's like to feel their own emotions. They start to learn their strengths, their weaknesses. And this is an opportunity. This is a time where a parent helps that child through that process. Unfortunately, if you had parents that were narcissistic, in other words, they lived life thinking everyone's an extension of them, and they never learned that they were separate from other people, right? They never went through that healthy stage when they were in their toddler years, and they now treat their children the same way they were treated. Generational trauma starts up. If you had parents like that, or if you had parents that had addictions where they were nice one moment, but you never knew what to expect, so it was a very unpredictable environment, or if you had emotionally unavailable parents, or another scenario that would hinder you from being able to develop a healthy, authentic self is if you were loved and treated well only when you did what your parent wanted. In other words, it was conditional love. They loved you when you were suiting them and meeting their needs, but not when you were acting authentic. Or again, if you lived walking on eggshells for any reason whatsoever, then your nervous system gets wired to put survival as a priority and authenticity as not even optional. as something that has to be like in the back burner. Survival trumps self-expression. If any of that sounds familiar, then you, like myself, we grew up not asking, who am I? But am I safe? Think of it like a flower that's trying to bloom in the middle of a storm. The petals never get to fully open because they're constantly being battered by the wind and the rain. Well, the same thing happens to a child in a chaotic environment. Instead of growing up and having that freedom of expression and expansion, they shrink, they adapt, and they become whatever they need to be in order to avoid conflict or the pain of rejection. Which, by the way, rejection, whether you're a child or an adult, is painful, right? But it's different in childhood in the sense that the pain of rejection is also accompanied by a life or death situation to your nervous system, because your nervous system's like, if I'm rejected by my tribe, by my parents, by my family, no one is there to take care of me, I could die. So understanding this also helps us to understand why healing and learning how to reclaim our authenticity, why it's so challenging. Because the very things we want to do to heal are registered as a threat to our nervous system. Remember, if in childhood being authentic meant separation from your family, your body is going to do everything in its power to keep you living in your protective self instead of your authentic self. So I think it's pretty easy to understand why we wound up growing up without a self-identity. So what does that look like when you become an adult? The survival strategies that you developed in childhood that kept you safe as a child now in your adult life leave you feeling lost, disconnected, or even like you're living a life that doesn't even feel like it's yours. It's almost like you're watching somebody else's life be lived and you're not an active participant in it. And instead of being able to develop personality traits, we wound up developing coping skills. And while these coping skills at one time protected you, they now keep you disconnected from real connections with others and disconnected from yourself. So we're going to talk about 3 of the most common coping skills that people with childhood trauma get stuck in. A very common coping skill that individuals with childhood trauma suffer with is people pleasing. In other words, you say yes when you want to say no. You shapeshift in conversations because you don't want to reveal how you really feel because you're afraid the other person's going to get upset. Maybe you agree with what others say just to keep the peace. Why? Because remember, as a child, keeping others happy kept you safe, which is the fawn trauma response. We suppress our authenticity and we show up how others want us to be because if they're happy, then we're safe. But now, staying stuck in the fawn trauma response keeps you from knowing what your own needs are, your desires, your boundaries, your likes, your perspectives, your perception, your passions. All of that is suppressed. And when we've been doing that for a long time, we don't even know who we are anymore. We've been yanking our personality inside out for so long, we lose touch with our authenticity. It kind of reminds me of that movie with Julia Roberts, Runaway Bride, where Richard Gere notices that she's been shapeshifting her whole life. So he asks all of her ex-boyfriends what her favorite eggs are, and they all answer the same as mine. And they were all different. And then she goes through this discovery period where she's starting to realize that she's been shapeshifting and she starts to rediscover, who am I? What do I like? And she realizes what her favorite eggs are. The point of me sharing that is that that tends to happen when we realize that we've lived life with no self-identity because we weren't allowed to have one, because we spent so much time trying to make other people happy to stay safe. We go through this period where we're like, what do I like? Who am I? And we start shifting from who I had to be to who I really am. That's an awesome time on our recovery. It is also a scary time because sometimes other people don't respond how we wished. It's also an uncomfortable time because our body starts kind of fighting us. Because remember, I mentioned it earlier, if being you is registered as a threat in your body, when you start to shift into that, you're going to feel discomfort in your body. The second coping skill that we wind up getting stuck in as an adult is hypervigilance, where we're always on high alert. We feel like we can never relax. In fact, it's almost like there's this thought that something bad will happen if we start relaxing. So we're always reading between the lines, we're anticipating problems even before they happen. Basically, our nervous system is still stuck in the past, in the time period where it had to be on alert 24/7 because there was no compassionate, loving, supportive adult that was helping you through the challenges in your childhood. So it's like your nervous system had to be the adult that was never there. And it never relaxes. It never stops looking for danger because it's so desperate to keep that small child safe. But you're an adult now. But to your nervous system, it hasn't caught up with that yet. Most people that are working through Cptsd or that had childhood trauma often resonate with having brain fog, right? And the reality is that if you grew up with a protective self that took over from being authentic, it actually affects the area of your brain that is active the most. So for example, as we're living our life, our prefrontal cortex, our thinking areas of our brain should be where we are spending the majority of our time. But if we have a protective self where our coping skills, our survival instinct took over, we're not here, we're in our midbrain. And when we're there, it's very difficult to think clearly. And so what happens is we get stuck in ruminating and overthinking, where we analyze everything. We replay over and over and over past interactions, trying to figure out what went wrong or what we should have done better. It's basically your brain's way of trying to prevent pain, but in reality, it's keeping you trapped in a loop that prevents real peace. Growing up with Cptsd and getting stuck in a protective self means that there was never any safety created inside. There's no inner safety. And so the survival brain, your protective self, is trying to manage your external world, right? Through all these coping skills that I've been mentioning to try to keep you safe. Another thing that it starts to do is disconnect you from your own feelings. In other words, feelings become a threat and it starts turning them off, and then it causes you to go into other coping skills that cause you to avoid your own emotions and feelings. So I mentioned a fawn response, trauma response with people pleasing. This is more like a flight trauma response where your body starts looking for ways to outrun your feelings. So you might distract yourself with food. It could be social media, work, becoming a workaholic, or even relationships. Anything to avoid the discomfort of sitting with your own emotions. Because again, growing up, emotions themselves were not safe. So now avoidance has become second nature. So we talked about why we wind up living life with no self-identity. We talked about what it looks like in our adult life if we are struggling with not having a self-identity, the coping skills we get stuck in. Now the question is like, how do you untangle this? It's like our nervous system has been rewired and is now comfortable living life with a protective self. We have an option right now. The option is to take the easy route. Do you know what the easy route is? Is to continue to allow our nervous system to be as it is because it's so familiar. Staying stuck in the trauma loops and the patterns, while we may not like them, to our body feels more comfortable than the other option. The other option is saying, I was not born with a nervous system wired like that. That was an acquired nervous system due to trauma. And it's time to start untangling it and rewiring it. Those are the two options. Here are a couple of tips that can help you to start rewiring your nervous system. The first has to do with conscious awareness. There are so many patterns that we wind up getting stuck in that are second nature. We don't even notice the patterns. We don't even notice the sequence of them. Well, starting to uncover them is the first step. It's about breaking out of unconscious default patterns that were conditioned and ingrained from childhood and choosing the patterns that are more in harmony with your authentic self. The second tip has to do with learning how to teach your body how to find inner safety. And guess what? This is a hard one because we cannot learn our way through this process. We can get it up here. We can understand we're safe. It doesn't mean that the body is in agreement with you, right? Think about it. If you're stuck in hypervigilance, I know with myself, I could be around safe people and my body was acting as if I was walking through a minefield. So I knew cognitively I was safe, but to my body, I wasn't. So helping your body learn safety is not something you can learn your way through. And on top of that, right, the protective self would love for you to try. The protective self would love for you to learn and stay stuck in the learning. That modality didn't work, learn another, learn another. Because if you're stuck up here, you're not seeing the trauma or feeling what's in the body. That's what your protective self has been trying to help you with since you were a child, to keep you from pain. It has disconnected you from your feelings, while healing is about reconnecting, which does mean we have to feel again. And that is so scary for the protective self. In the School of Transformation, these are the things we do together as a group because it is so hard to do this work alone. But I'm not going to lie. I will tell you, when there are new members that come on, one of the first things they say is, Michele, my body feels so much discomfort at the thought of noticing it, at the thought of allowing feelings to be present. That's reality. Part of this work is really uncomfortable until we start showing our body that we can feel and that we're safe to feel. So it's a process. And then the third thing that we have to do is start uncovering, what is our preference? What do we like? What don't we like? Kind of like Julia Roberts in Runaway Bride, where she put out all the eggs and she tried them all to ask herself, like, which one do I like, regardless of what other people think? We have to go through that uncovering process as well. That's the beautiful part of this journey. As we're learning how to release the protective self, we start getting to know who we really are. And our authentic self is completely healed and untouched by the trauma. It's just buried beneath all of those coping skills. So the beautiful part of the journey is rediscovering that version of ourselves. So if you spend your whole life adapting, surviving, playing small to make other people happy so that you can stay safe, and you're ready to do the inner work to heal, but it's too hard to do alone, make sure to join me live on Zoom in the School of Transformation, because that's what we do. But if you can't join me live, then I hope you walk away with this truth. You are not broken. Trauma does not have to be a life sentence. Your nervous system simply did exactly what it was designed to do. It adapted due to your circumstances. But now it's time to learn a new way. The real, authentic you is still in there, underneath the coping skills, underneath the survival patterns, underneath the fear of feeling, and you deserve to meet that version of yourself. If this video resonated with you, let me know in the comment section, what survival patterns have you noticed in yourself? And if you're ready to start healing again, come join me live on Zoom every week in the School of Transformation, because this is just the beginning.